Thank you all for being here this evening. I'm not going to take up too much of your time, but welcome to Webinar Wednesday. I'll be talking about the mini grant this evening. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. All right. So we're talking about the mini grant this evening. So just a little bit about us as a council. We are a nonprofit affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Our mission is to empower Arkansans to connect with the humanities by encouraging the discovery and understanding of our diverse and mutual experiences. And we do this through programming and our grant making. And so we look for projects in our grant making that exemplify our mission and carry out that mission as well. So just a little bit about what we're going to do this evening. Overview of what the mini grant is, what projects are eligible, how to apply, what that review, evaluation, and decision-making process is like, and then what final steps would need to happen if you were awarded for this grant. So right now, we have changed our maximum award amount for this grant. It is now $3,000. Cost share is still not required. This will take place January 1st. Of 2025. So this current grant cycle, October 15th to November 30th, it doesn't affect this 3,000 right now. So it's still 5,000 for this current cycle, but beginning cycles in 2025, it'll be that 3,000. If approved with your LOI, the application deadline will be in January. So the types of projects for this grant, we have humanities-based projects, which would be a public program, research, publication. We also have other media and planning projects for humanities projects. So public programs are very straightforward in that it's a humanities scholar talking with an audience. So this could be a lecture, webinar, workshop, anything of the like, talking about humanities to an Arkansas audience. Research can be done individually or collaboratively on topics of Arkansas prehistory, history, and culture. The outcomes must be of interest to Arkansans and have stakes in our communities here in the state, and same with publications. Traditionally, we require a traditional publisher to be a part of that process, but for small organizations, we have made the decision to allow self-publishing for that grant. Other media projects include exhibits, website content, historical signage, markers, podcasts, other kinds of webinars and virtual tours. So this is just extending what a humanities project could look like if it doesn't fit in the public programs, publications, and research buckets. So it would go under other media. And then we have a planning grant that is specific to the mini grant. This is just a preliminary stage if you're intending to plan for a major grant in the future. This will allow you the time and the funding to plan a larger project that would kind of be the final product of your planning mini grant. We do have two new types of projects as of this year. We are now allowing operational funding for small organizations of $250,000 of an annual budget or less. These organizations need to be humanities-based and have at least one full-time employee and be located in Arkansas to be eligible for operational funding. We have just added genealogical research and documentation. This includes research, digitization, and or documentation of cemeteries, churches, funeral home records, and or obituaries. You can do this to conduct workshops, research, and documentation for these different categories, but is only specifically for these organizations in Arkansas. But if you have any questions about if you have ideas for a project, whether they would be applicable or eligible for our grant funding, feel free to reach out at any time. We are more than happy to assist you through the process. And so once you've kind of settled on a project, which type of project you're doing, you'll go to submit a letter of intent or an LOI. That is just letting us know that you're eligible to be considered for funding. And so what we're looking for here is tax exemption, project description, and project budget. We're asking that those be submitted ahead of the application so we can give any kind of initial feedback, or if you're a little outside of our scope, we can let you know before you do the full application. Organizations applying for the mini grant will only be considered if their LOI is submitted prior to the due date of November 30th. So to be eligible for funding for this period, you need to have your LOI submitted by the 30th. And so for your tax exemption, we're looking for three things. We're looking for an EIN, employment identification number, your letter of determination from the IRS, and a unique entity ID that it be registered and active in SAM.gov. And so these are all just numbers and documentation showing that your organization is tax exempt and therefore eligible for federal funding. And so what we're looking for with those as well is that your applicant organization, so who you're applying as, needs to match the names on all of this documentation. And so if that doesn't match up, we're going to have to send it back to you so that it does. So we run into this a lot with universities where they're applying as the university, but they're submitting information about the foundation that's linked to like their donor and development. It doesn't really jive for what we need for our eligibility requirements. And so we'll need all of those names to match across the board for that paperwork. And then your project description is letting us know clearly and concisely what is happening with your project and what you're requesting funding for during that grant period. We should know exactly who, what, when, where, and why in that description. With your initial project budget, it should reflect what you're doing for your project. And it doesn't have to be anything really fancy at this point. It's just letting us know what you're requesting funds for, how much, and what you're kind of ballparking as an estimate and where you're getting those quotes from. So if you're doing a lecture series, what you're intending to do as honoraria or venue, advertising, any of those kind of costs, being sure to include those in your budget as well. So once you have filled that out and submitted, it'll go for staff review. And so we're looking for complete and thorough responses, that all of your tax exemption paperwork is complete and it's all active and current, that your financial documentation matches up with your project description, and that your description generally is in our guidelines as far as a humanities project or operational project or genealogical research project. So if there are no issues, we'll move on to the approved, and then you will move on to your application and being able to fill that out before January 15th. If we have issues with your UEI, it typically is either like the ID is assigned and not fully active, or if we need additional information about your tax letter, or we have a couple questions as far as what your project description is, we'll send it back to you to allow you to do corrections. So that way you can resubmit and still be possibly eligible for funding for this grant cycle. And so once you submit something, you're not just thrown to the wolves. We want to help you as much as possible. So we'll send feedback, and once you resubmit it, we'll go through the process again. Once it's been approved, we'll move forward to the application. And so this gets into the very fine-tuned details of what is happening with your project. So we'll ask information about your grant period. For this current cycle, it would be anywhere from February 1 of 2025 to January 31st of 2026. And so basically you have a year from February 1, 25 to complete your project. We can't, for this particular cycle, have projects starting before February 1, but as long as it starts after that date, all is good. We'll also ask general information about your organization, including your congressional district, where you're located. We'll ask for the project's target audience, geographic regions, counties, and audience served by the project, and similar questions as far as like data collection and what your project's trying to do. We're asked for a finance contact. So this is the person on your end who will be handling the finances. As the applicant and project director, you're unable to also serve as the fiscal agent. You'll need a second person to be involved in this process with you. That's who we'll be working with on our end to disperse your funds if awarded. We'll also ask about the humanities content of your project. This is more for your humanities projects and genealogical research, less with the operational funding. We're asking what your project covers as far as humanities, and being able to describe and highlight where those fields are being highlighted in your project. With that, we'll ask for humanities scholars. So these are people who have expertise in those fields who are assisting you on the project. We view all of our grant projects as collaborative efforts between you, your organization, and humanities scholars. We do ask that at least one person who is a scholar be not the project director and be outside of your organization. For universities, particularly, if you're in one department, if you get someone else from a different department, that is okay. If you're a small organization or museum, you can reach out to a university, or you can reach out to a community expert, someone in your community who has a lot of knowledge about what you're talking about. Those would all be acceptable as humanities scholars. We will also ask about project planning and how it was planned, how you will determine evaluating the project, if it was successful, or where you could work on it in the future, who the audience is and how they'll be impacted. We'll ask for a publicity and distribution plan, especially for our public programs. For other projects, we'll ask for personnel information, transcripts, biographies, scripts, and so on. And so the different types of humanities projects are like the public programs, research, publications. We require different things of each of them. For your public program, for your publication, we'll ask that your transcript of what you're asking to be published be submitted ahead of time with your application. For, say, a podcast or oral history project, we'll ask for your interview questions, who you plan to be interviewing, and who would be conducting those interviews and what kind of expertise that they have. And so we ask for different stuff for different applications. So as far as the humanities, because there's the National Endowment for the Humanities and the National Endowment for the Arts, the government has decided we're technically separate, although they do intertwine and overlap and operate very closely together. And so we have to find ways to distinguish humanities from the arts. Generally speaking, humanities are academic disciplines that study human society and culture. They're largely critical, speculative, or methods of inquiry, and are grounded in historical perspective. And the long and short of it, the arts do, the humanities talk about it. And so in a more visual way, they're all connected but are separate. If you are a more arts-driven organization, there are ways that you can apply for our grants. You just have to tie in more humanities content, whether it be through like art history, through culture, through folklore, literature, and those kinds of subfields of the humanities to be able to bolster what is the humanities content of your project, even though you may be an arts organization. And so this is what it'll look like in Found It when you get to the application stage. Once you get past that general information, it'll ask you the type of grant you're applying for. So the humanities project is everything from public programs, research, publication, planning, and other media. And then we have the operations and genealogical research and documentation as separate fields on the application. From here, it'll prompt you to different questions depending on which type of grant you're applying for. So for a humanities project, for the dropdown on grant type, this is where you'll select public program, planning, publication, or whichever type of project you're applying for. The humanities area that is the project covers, and your project description. They should reflect fairly similarly to what you put in your LOI. You would be able to expand on it, or different parts that you weren't able to hit initially in that first form. After that, we'll ask those questions about your evaluation, your communities, your estimate of your audience, and the accessibility of your public program if that's what you're choosing to do for this grant. For operations, however, if that's what you select, we ask for your organization's mission statement, budget size, how many full-time staff you have, the purpose of your operations request, and project need, description of your proposed project, and how what you're selecting will be an impact for your organization, and how this grant will greatly affect your organization, and how those funds will be used over the grant period. For genealogical research and documentation, we'll ask those specific questions of what documents are being focused on, the type of project in that subfield of the grant type, and then more about your proposed project and evaluation and how that'll impact of your the audience that you're serving. Once you've completed those specific grant type questions, there is a next section called attachments, and this is where we get into our budget and getting into the nitty-gritty of what you're requesting funds for. So there is a 3-page packet that is attached to the application that you can download and that we require you to fill out to be eligible for funding. We unfortunately can't accept Excel documents or Word documents or what ledger you have at your organization. We have to use our PDF forms. And so your budget summary is basically a table that explains in broad strokes where your income is coming from if you have it, or how much you're requesting in what broad categories. In your budget explanation, that is where we get into unit costs of what you're requesting. So if you're ordering books or you're ordering equipment, this is where you'll tell us exactly what you're ordering, the unit costs, and for the line total if you're ordering more than one thing. For this portion, we do require quotes for anything that's not federal or state rated. So postage and mileage, those are both federal rates. And so you would include, for like if you're mailing out postcards for an event, you would include the USPS postage rate for mailing out those postcards for your event. If you're doing traveling for a particular research project, you'll do that in the federal mileage rate. If you are printing through a different company, you'll provide us an invoice or a quote or a purchase order to let us know where you got your figure from that is in your budget documentation. And so across all of these pages, everything should add up and match across the board. If it doesn't, we will reach out and ask for more information or for you to clarify where you're getting your figures from. And so this is our top sheet for the budget summary. It goes from cost share to amount requested from Humanities Arkansas. For this particular grant, there is no cost share that's required. So if you don't have anything to put there, that is okay. If you are contributing, so if you're doing a public program and you're doing a reception, unfortunately, that is an ineligible cost for our grant. So you would include whatever you're spending for that as a part of your cost share, or any other similar items for whichever project you're choosing to apply for. From here, we get into a little more detail as far as where those big numbers go into different categories. So if you're requesting funds for honoraria and travel, you'll put that here in this little column here, what you're requesting from us. And then you'll put all other cost share numbers here. I will note that printing costs have been capped at 25% of your total budget. That includes cost share and what you're requesting. As well as there's a cap on speaker fees and honoraria. There will be a maximum amount of $1,000 per speaker, but not exceeding $5,000 per proposal. If you have a large event that you're applying for that requires more speakers than what our cap is, you would be able to do that on your cost share. So you can only request $5,000 from us, but if there's overages, you can do that as cost share. And then this is the explanation of those two top sheets. And so you'll break it down by each category. So if you're requesting personnel and or honoraria, you'll start with that at the top and then go through each of those other categories down the list, and being able to include what it is, how much the unit cost is, your total cost. You can link in quotes from different websites if that's what you're doing, or you can, at the back of your packet, attach the different quotes and invoices that you use to get these figures. So if you're doing operations, you can if you're requesting funds for your rent or your utilities or your salaries, you'll include with your budget the past 6 months or like the same period you're requesting for of the previous year, of what those numbers look like last year to inform what you're requesting for this year. So all of that should attach, and all of those pages should match up all from beginning to end. And so once you have all of those things, you'll submit your application for staff review. Here, I feel it's important to let you know that I don't make any kind of decisions, neither do anyone on staff. We are here to help make your application as strong, as complete as possible before it goes for board evaluation. Who makes those decisions? And so we're looking for complete and thorough responses. The more characters you use, the fuller you make your responses, the better. It gives us a better idea of what you're working with and that you've put a lot of time into your proposal. Once it gets there, we'll look at all parts of your application. We'll compare it to your letter of intent to see how it changed, if you're still asking for the same things. If we do need corrections or additional information about what you're asking for funds for, we will send it back to you. We'll shoot you an email being like, hey, there's something wonky with your budget. Can you send me a quote for this? Or, hey, this doesn't really line up from your LOI. Could you explain what happened here? We'll send it back to you. We'll give you some time to fix it, and then we'll go through the process again. Once, if it's complete the first time, we'll hold it till all of the batch is ready. After your second pass through, what you've presented to us is what will be going to the board. They will take some time and they will review and evaluate your project. They do that with in mind our allocation for this particular grant cycle. And so depending on the cycle, it's really a really popular cycle, more competitive with more applications. They're a little more ticky about what how stringent they are on their cuts. But they'll take their time, they'll review and evaluate. Sometimes they'll ask questions that we'll then ask you if we need additional information. But then once that time has passed, we'll reach a decision from the board committee, and they will provide scores, comments, and stipulations sometimes as far as what they would recommend for funding. And so we'll notify the applicants whether it's approved or denied, any stipulations or clarifications and feedback at that time. If awarded, you will receive a very long email with your grant number and links back to Foundit, where there will be the grant agreement pay request. This is our pre-award paperwork just saying you're agreeing to what was approved and that you and the people you're working with also agree to the proposal that was approved. We have changed our grant payout to a 90-10 split. So you'll receive 90% upfront with your grant agreement pay request. Once your project is completed, there will be a final report where we ask for evaluations and data collection over the course of your project. So this includes for your public programs, surveys from your audience, surveys from your speakers, surveys from your evaluation committee. Same thing with like exhibits and podcasts, any kind of numerical data and any kind of verbal and written feedback from your participants. And so that'll determine the success of your project's planning, implementation, and reach. That's when we'll also ask for your second pay request, where you'll receive the 10% installment. And so from award to completion, you have a year to complete your project and expend all funds. And so, as I mentioned, we've changed our pay schedule from the 50, 25, 25 to a 90, 10 and done away with a quarterly report. We do have deadlines for both of those. If your project doesn't super fit within the timeline, we do still ask that you submit like your grant agreement and pay request up front. With your final report, we do understand that things happen. We just ask that you reach out and let us know what's going on with your project. If we need to extend any kind of deadlines, we're happy to help where we can, because things need to be complete on time, and we hope that we can help you if necessary, and everyone remain in compliance. And so, as a recap from start to finish, uh, mini grants currently at the end of 2024 are still 5,000, but at the beginning of 2025, the maximum award for mini grants will be 3,000. We are currently accepting letters of intent until November 30th with an application deadline of January 15th. We've extended those projects from humanities projects to operations and genealogical research. Yeah, that is in a 25-minute rundown of mini grants here at Humanities AR. But otherwise, we'll go ahead and wrap up here, and I hope you all have a good evening.